I'm honored to introduce the first invited speaker, Professor Prof. Mahaliyanaarchchi. I've been knowing him for many years because he was a former Vice Chancellor of the Sabaragamuwa University. Professor Mahaliyanaarchchi commenced his career as an Assistant Regional Manager in 1987 at the Tea Small Holdings Development Authority of Sri Lanka. He completed his PhD in Agricultural Sciences at the Postgraduate Institute of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya, and obtained his PhD in 1996. He joined the Sabaragamuwa University of Sri Lanka as a senior lecturer in 1997, and then did a lot of work, development work in the university as a young and relatively young lecturer, senior lecturer in the capacity, and also in the capacity of Professor of Agribusiness Management, a very important discipline in this country, and became the professor in 2005. He had held many administrative positions at Sabaragamuwa University and became the Vice Chancellor in the year 2005 for a period of 3 years, but he didn't want to go for a second term, unlike us. In addition, during his period, he was the head of the Department of Agribusiness Management, Dean of the Faculty of Agricultural Sciences, and Director of the External Degree Programs and Extension Services Unit of the university. And he has worked as a member of the expert group of higher education policy planning of the Ministry of Higher Education, Sri Lanka in 2007, and was a member of the review panel of Quality Assurance of Sri Lankan Universities in the Quality Assurance and Accreditation Council of the University Grants Commission. And I understand that he has also reviewed the faculty of management of KDU. He is working as the academic advisor of the Sri Lanka Military Academy since 2008. He has written 5 books, 2 monographs, and published 20 journal papers during his career as an academic in the university. He is the founder editor-in-chief of the Journal of Agricultural Sciences, and now I understand he has his own company, which he will also talk about. I am honored to invite Professor Mahaliyanaarchchi to make your presentation.
Good afternoon. The Chairperson, Professor Shanika Hiniburagama, the Dean of the Faculty, and distinguished professors and fellow lecturers, and ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to me that inviting to be a plenary lecturer, give a speech on the new avenue for socio-economic development, alternative tourism. Today, tourism becomes one of the most important economic subsector in development of a country. In the world, out of 12.4 jobs, 1 is from the tourism sector. That is the information from 2012. The fastest tourism growing area in the world is Southeast Asia and Pacific, with growth rate of 14.5. After the ending of 30-year civil war in Sri Lanka, in 2009, tourism sector has been grown significantly. Tourism has become a fast-growing sector of the economy after ending the 30-year-old civil war in the country, especially in the north and east. It is proven that after 2009 May, the month civil war was ended, the tourist arrival to country has been increased rapidly. The tourist arrival in 2009 was 447,890. It was increased by nearly 210,000 in 2010, and total number of tourists visited the country was 654,476. In 2011, it was 853,975. The number of tourists expected by the Tourist Board of Sri Lanka in 2016 is 2 million. It shows that the importance of tourism in development of a country's economy as a whole. However, from the recent past, the tourism sector demonstrated the changes in traveling attitudes. Decrease in the seasonality feature of tourism and active holidays depending on culture, nature, traditional way of life have become the objectives of new tourists, and the economic, social and environmental impacts on the area where the tourism activity taking place in. You know, the first tourism or the first trip as a tourist started in somewhere around 17th and 18th century, which we call Grand Tour, by the British sons and daughters of the British elites to the Europe, from London to up to Rome. That took somewhere around 6 months to 1 year period. That is the beginning of Western tourism. There may be Eastern tourism before that, but it's the beginning of Western tourism, which we call, according to the definition, the tourism. And the first person who has started tourism as a company is Thomas Cook, famous Thomas Cook. That is one-day rail excursion in 1841. And first commercial trips to Europe started by the Thomas Cook and Company in 1855. In 2012, world tourism has been dominated by two major companies, namely TUI Travel PLC and Thomas Cook Group PLC. TUI Travel PLC has managed 30 million customers, operated in 180 countries with 200 brands in 31 key source markets, and had 54,000 employees. Thomas Cook Group PLC has managed nearly 6 million customers, over 81 hotels, having 700 travel shops, and had nearly 15,000 employees. Both companies are operated from UK. This information clearly indicates that how these multinational companies control the whole economy in tourism industry. Today, full package holiday approach of mass tourism is one of the negative factors affecting the economic survival of local small-scale entrepreneurs through its feature of leading the tourist stay in the facility during their holiday. Therefore, it leads following specific tourism development approaches distinct from mass tourism development for developing new subsectors of tourism, which is named as alternative tourism. Most of these alternative tourism approaches are closely related with rural economy and thereby rural development. The main reason for this is tourist destination of these alternative tourism approaches are rural areas. The alternative tourism approaches are namely nature tourism, ecotourism, heritage tourism, agro-tourism, farm tourism, religious tourism, and many more. This alternative tourism creates a new economic opportunity in rural areas. This situation leads to the relationship between socio-economic development and tourism in rural areas. Further, this economic relationship causes creating a number of tourism types in rural areas. However, alternative tourism activities are not limited only to rural areas. Especially types of tourism such as MICE tourism, which is called meetings, incentives, conferences and exhibitions. War tourism, slum tourism, sports tourism are related to urban and suburban areas. Therefore, benefits of alternative tourism definitely filter to both rural and urban communities. The coming up Commonwealth conferences in Sri Lanka belongs to the type of MICE tourism. Considering the geographical features of the island, climatic variation within a shorter distances, rich biodiversity, rich historical and heritage values, and delicious local cuisine, Sri Lanka can be an attractive tourist destination in the world. This tropical island has an exceptional biodiversity and rich cultural heritage with greatest potential for tourist attraction. According to the world-famous Handbook in Tourism Information, Lonely Planet, published in London, the best country for tourism in 2013 is Sri Lanka. The key feature for high tourist attraction in Sri Lanka is tourism resources and destinations are located within a small geographical area. Therefore, distance and travel time between these tourist attractions are minimized. Due to the fast road developments in the country, travel time is much shorter than it was a decade before. There are a number of opportunities in development tourism sector in Sri Lanka. They can be listed as follows. Peace and security established in the country after ending 30 years civil war, political stability, infrastructure development such as roads, electricity, water, etc., newly introduced online visa system, less natural disaster compared to other competitors in the country, low cost of living for tourists, and the hospitality of the people, which is heritage from the generations. And we will see what is the tourism and alternative tourism. Tourism fulfills a human need for rest and recreation. People normally set out to see other places and meet other people. Other people, meanwhile, extend their hospitality to their guests, a national trait worthy of praise. Nevertheless, tourism also satisfies the thirst for profit. Big business hungry for mega buck profits, resorts to gross commercialism and imposes unsuitable development programs. In the process, people get trampled upon, cultures eroded, and ecosystems deteriorated. Developing countries such as Sri Lanka, main recipients of these development programs, usually end up the losers. Tanzania in Africa has gained larger income from its tourism industry. However, considering the cultural degradation happened due to mass tourism industry in the country, Mr. Julius Nyerere, the first president of Tanzania, once told, "I don't want foreign currency to this kind of tourism which erodes the culture and human values of my people. I would like to stop it if this situation continues." So that was happened in Tanzania in 1970s and 1980s, which has happened under the Julius Nyerere's regime. Many developing countries in the early 70s hugged tourism as a quick recipe for development, confounding from high unemployment rates and heavy indebtedness. Many governments saw tourism as a source of foreign exchange to fund balance of payments, deficits, and services, therefore in debts. Tourism also promised a viable source of investments for their backward economies and source of quick livelihood and employment for their unskilled workers. From around 70 million people who spent a few $1 billion in 1960s, the number of tourists rose to nearly 1 billion, spending US dollars 1.3 trillion in 2012. You can see what is the share of economy by the tourism sector in the world. Unfortunately, majority of this money goes back to the developed countries and the multinational companies like Thomas Cook's PLC and other big tourist companies. This is not understood by the people and the governments and as well as the planners in tourism sector. So, why we are talking about the alternative tourism? Alternative tourism emerged from the developing countries as a reaction to the negative effects of mass tourism heaped on them. Alternative tourism as a counter trend seeks to right these abuses by challenging the profit structure and commercial premise of the tourism industry. Alternative tourism works to redefine tourism back to its original spirit of exchange and solidarity among peoples. This is a niche market. The evolution of tourism industry has been anxious and to a large scale been dictated by the fluctuation in the socio-economic and political landscape of the world. Mass consumerism and mass tourism has been slowly given way to the personalized and custom service offerings. Tourism industry has witnessed radical changes in the travel preferences as well as customer expectations. Niche tourism, as it is recognized now, has been embraced by both the travel operators and the travelers alike, and is gradually being accepted as part of the mainstream tourism. Digital and e-marketing tools and methodologies provide a perfect foil for this emerging and productive segment. Cultural tours, wine tours, tea tours, coffee tours, architectural wonder travels, forest tours are just some of the flavors of the alternative and niche tourism. A sustained online marketing campaign is capable of creating unprecedented visibility for these travel treasure trovers. Ecotourism, hot spring tours, adventure and heritage site travel, rainforest and backwater travel, agro-tourism are just some of niche tourism concepts which are considered as alternative tourism. Types of alternative tourism: cultural tourism, ecotourism, community-based tourism, culinary tourism, heritage tourism, medical tourism, wildlife, nature, wellness, geotourism, slum tourism, religious tourism. There are people who are going to Buddha Gaya and people who are going to Mecca, people who are going to Jerusalem. This is a type of religious tourism. Pro-poor tourism, disaster tourism, people who are coming to see the disaster places and they spend money, and these are disaster tourism. Sports tourism, doom tourism, MICE tourism, city tourism and agro-tourism. These are some examples for alternative tourisms. Further, alternative tourism is applied to tourism which does not damage the environment, is ecologically sound, and avoids the negative impacts of many large-scale tourism developments undertaken in areas which have not previously been developed. Alternative tourism is thought to consist of smaller-scale developments or attractions for tourists which are set in rural or communities and organized by them. These are seen as having fewer negative effects, social or cultural, and a better chance of being acceptable to the local people than mass tourism. There is a question of who benefits. Certain kind of tourism are called alternative because they are not exploitative of the local people, exploitative to the local people because of the benefits flow to local residents or in general to poorer communities. In contrary, conventional tourism demands large-scale organization and resources not usually available locally or even in the host country. My professional definition for alternative tourism is every kind of tourism other than mass tourism which respects and conserves the socio-cultural values of communities and helps to improve their economic standards. However, sex tourism and gambling tourism are of course not included in the alternative tourism. The reason is both types of tourism do not carry good values to the communities nor its environment. It is true that there are also some constraints of alternative tourism. Alternative tourism in developing countries has been much more limited and less successful than mass tourism due to various of reasons. The alternative tourism projects in the developing countries are frequently handicapped by the cost of international travel in the first place and poor local connections with destinations in the second. Differences in culture and standards of living between host and guest are also the constraints. Having mentioned about the constraints of alternative tourism, it is necessary to ask therefore, why should we promote alternative tourism form of tourism? The answer would appear to lie in an assumption that the alternative forms of tourism and tourists will have fewer and less negative effects on destination areas and their populations without diminishing the positive economic effects, that is, achieving the best of all worlds. I believe that both mass tourism and alternative tourism are needed in development of tourism in Sri Lanka. However, there is a big potential to develop alternative type of tourism in the country, and it helps to filter the economic benefits of tourism to the economically handicapped communities too. The conclusion. From the overall discussion, it would seem that mass tourism is an economically sound development area, but it certainly makes damage to the socio-cultural values of the communities. Most of the tourism directed at mass tourism developments arises because of the unplanned nature of the development, especially without paying serious concern to the environment and socio-cultural issues arising due to project implementation. More than 3 decades of experience has suggested that true alternative tourism is one that not subject to the profit motives of big business interests alternative tourism also works for an empowered community that can and will reject development imposition on their lives. Only then can we really talk of having gone back to tourism's original spirit, that of exchange and solidarity among people. So that is cultural tourism, eco-tourism, farm tourism, doom tourism, mice tourism, sports, and thank you for not sleeping. And I would like to show, I have started agro-tourism in Sri Lanka, started in my university with a agri-fact pharmacy with a course module which is now nearly 100 students got trained on agro-tourism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mahaliyanaarchchi. Definitely you have a lot more to talk about tourism. The questions will be at the end.